It's the 30th of April 2008 and today I'm in Brisbane and I am interviewing I should say, Charlie, commonly known as Chiller, Chiller Goodchap, who was a survivor of the HMAS Perth when it was sunk in the Sunda Straits. Following his recovery from the water, he then spent some time on Java and then subsequently building on the Burma-Thailand Railway in Burma, and finally he finished his time as a prisoner of war in Japan. I'll now direct your attention to Charlie. With Charlie, okay. Today it's my privilege to interview Charlie Wray and Charlie, or Chiller, Goodchap, both survivors of the HMAS Perth, and we're going to talk about their experiences with the sinking of the Perth, their subsequent experiences on the Burma-Thailand Railway, and at least in one case, experiences of being in Japan. So I'll start with you there, Charlie. Yeah. In quick terms, can you tell us about the battle for was it the battle for the Java Sea that preceded yours? Okay, so
yeah, we left Surabaya and went out with 14 ships of all sizes, and after the Java battle there was only 2 of us left, and that was Perth and Euston.
Yes.
I didn't see much of the battle because I was downstairs, down below on the electrical side of the ship. I was a wireman attached to the torpedo pole.
Yes.
So that's really all. It was a small break, and I came up onto the deck. And just as I came up, the torpedo was coming at us, and it was meant for us, but it went too deep, and just over a little bit, a few hundred yards over, a British destroyer clopped it right in the centre, and down she went. So that's how fast they go. During the battle there, we never got a scratch. The good skipper, he knows how to handle them. That's all I can say of the Java Sea battle. Okay,
well I'll ask, this is going to be confusing, we're working with 2 Charlies, but Chiller and Charlie, what about the battle for the Java Sea?
Well, the Java Sea battle, I was in B turret, which is a twin 6-inch turret, and we're locked in, and our skipper of the turret was Lieutenant Huyton, RN, and he instructed me to go out of the turret onto B deck, which is only a very small deck, and throw the cartridge cases overboard. They're beautiful copper cases, but nevertheless he felt that if we do get into trouble, they're going to be more harm than good. So I was there for approximately half an hour throwing these cartridges over, and I did see part of the battle. I'm too busy bloody getting rid of cartridge cases really, but I did notice that the ships of the Dutch De Ruyter, which was the flagship, we were in a straight line behind her. The 4 cruisers, De Ruyter, the Java, the Houston and the Perth, were in direct line, and flanking on the port side and on the starboard side were destroyers, and there were four stack American destroyers, very old, and the Electra, the Jupiter, and a bit of Dutch stuff, but we all seemed to be in a line, and it went through, we were only 18, it went through my mind, well, if they don't torpedo the first ship, they're going to get the second or the third. And I really think that the Dutch admiral was not conversant with naval fighting, and as it turned out, of course, that Heck Waller from the Perth was really the man who, for flotilla leader in the Mediterranean. I just felt that it was a bad mistake, and a very bad mistake.
Yes.
And then I got back into the turret again then, and we went from there.
Yes. I'll just, Charlie, I'll just ask you, this is a difficult question. What are your emotions like when you're in battle?
Well, I couldn't see anything to get excited about. I knew it was out there, but I couldn't see a thing.
Did you have any fear though?
No. Well, at 18 and 19, you haven't got any fear, have you?
You're bulletproof.
Yeah. So, actually, no, I wasn't frightened.
Yeah, yeah.
I had confidence in our skipper.
Yes, yeah. And this is Heck Waller.
Yeah,
and the Dutch skipper was De Ruyter, was it? Was that
Yeah,
his name?
yeah,
De Ruyter.
he was an admiral, but
Yeah.
he shouldn't have been in charge.
Yes, yeah. And now, what about when you came to the closure of the day of the 28th of February, when the vessel was mortally wounded? Do you remember the circumstances then?
That was March the
Sure.
1st. March the 1st.
It's March the 1st, is it? Yes.
Well, it was, as far as we're concerned,
Yes.
March. But
Yeah.
what were our feelings? Well, we had an abandoned ship.
Yeah.
The bridge is right above B turret,
Yeah.
and the fellow with the earphones in the turret
Yes.
said, "Prepare to abandon ship."
Yes.
Well, with that, Heighton had a door opened up, and everybody jumped from the turret, and in the turret there would be round about 18, 19 in the turret, and everyone hopped down onto B deck.
Mm.
Fortunately for me, my father was an Anzac bloke, and he said to me, before you do anything, make sure that you know you're going to do right. Just wait for 3 or 4 seconds. And that never went out of my head. And 3 of us did that, the layer and the trainer and myself. And they were the senior rank to me. And with that, a shell hit B turret and killed the entire group on B, were down on B deck, killed them with the exception of 2, and they were blown into the water. And one was Chesty Bond, we called him. His name was Bond, but Chesty, and another fellow named Danny Marr. And Danny Marr had, as it turned out later, had terrific shrapnel shells, and Chesty Bond was infected. And they were rammers, the big heavy blokes. And so then the 3 of us got out of the turret, and I climbed up to the waist of the ship, and there were about 4 or 5 fellows there with asbestos. They were the fire crew, and they couldn't get out of their big asbestos suits or anything, and so I was joined by somebody else, or 2 or 3 of us there, and we got them undressed out of their overalls on them, and I might say that we all go to battle in overalls, and then I decided then that it was time to do the big jump, and I did hear Waller say abandon ship.
Ah, you did.
And I heard that, and we would be told be the only ones apart from the bridge people that would hear that. And anyway, then the time came and I was on the port side waist and by the canteen, and I thought, well, this is it, you've got to get out of this. So I went over, and it was black dark and so forth, and they were still firing stuff out, and it was, we'd had 3 torpedoes when I went over at that time. One torpedo went through the ordinary Siemens mess deck, the Siemens mess deck down below, and I realised then that the ship would either break in half or do something silly. The screws of the ship were going around, 20 screws were going around very slowly in the combustion, and the ship was very slowly going forward. And I jumped over the 1.5-mile cliff. I jumped over and I went down to the stern of the ship. I couldn't get away from it, and I could hear the thumping of the big propellers. And the next minute, I can recall this vividly, but I said to myself, well, you've been hit by something. I knew it wasn't the propellers because it threw you away, but a lot of debris in the water. And I thought, well, this is it, and I virtually died. And the next thing I knew was, I don't know how long after, but someone grabbed me by the overalls at the back and pulled me onto a curly raft, and the overalls just disintegrated. They were no use.
And Charlie, what about when you're in the water? Did you manage to get onto a life raft, or did you have a Mae West on?
Well, actually, what I spoke before was on the Java Sea battle, but for Sunda Straits battle, I was down in number 3 diesel room as standby to turn on the electric switches and breakers and that if necessary, and with a tiny Savage. He was leading stoker who used to have to start the auxiliary motor, the diesel motor. He started, then the ones got going, the generator would turn out some juice, and then I'd make the breaker, and that'd generate through the ship wherever it could go. We heard the abandoned ship given, and this compartment we were in was only a very small compartment for the motor and that. And as we went down to go into action, you were clipped down, and the only way you could get out was by someone undoing the clips for it. But fortunately, Tiny's mate was on patrol up the passage, and he knew Tiny was down in the diesel room. So he undid the clips, and we climbed the ladder and got out. Then from there we had to go through a bulkhead. The first time we tried to push it, it wouldn't open. Most probably with the explosions, and that has jammed it. So anyway, all of a sudden we got together and we gave it one good shove, and away she went. We got through that. Then we had to get up the ladder from that deck up onto to the main deck. At that time all the water was coming in, and we had from here to about you, sitting there. We had to make that set of staircase to get up onto the upper deck. If you missed, you were gone. So Tiny had a go, and he made it. And then it was my turn to go, so I made it. We had to pull ourselves up the steps. You couldn't just walk up and start in the lift, very much support. And then when we got to the upper deck, fortunately there was some ropes hanging down. At that time the deck was pretty well vertical, and we had on these ropes, we pulled ourselves up to the railing, climb over that, and then Tiny and I, we virtually walked down the ship's side into the water. Then we swam out to the skipper's launch it was, because we had our blimps on that on, so we got out there to blow them up to see if they'd be any good. And kicked our boots off when we knew they weren't any good. So we, as we got our blimps up, the launch just started to sink. It was absolutely riddled with shrapnel. And then from there I got onto a Carly raft, and I stopped on that for quite some time.
Yes. Now, where did you eventually come ashore?
I tried to get to shore,
Mm.
but still it'll bear me out on this.
Uh-huh.
The whirlies in the water
Yeah.
was just like the entrance into Melbourne,
Yes.
Port Phillip Bay.
Yeah, through the rip.
If you got the right real wiggly, it'd shoot you into the surf. I'd stuck to the wrong ones. I had 3 times to go ashore and I couldn't go.
Mm.
It used to get you and just push you back out to sea.
Mm.
So after that, it was a destroyer there, and I got picked up with the destroyer. There's quite a lot of the boys on board.
Well, I could come in there on that. When I surfaced and put on the Carly raft, which was the best thing. We got all these Carly rafts off the deck, off the wharf in Tanjong Priok. But a fellow named Nick Carter. Nick was a leading seaman, would be the best seaman the Perth crew ever met anyway, and he was born in Torrens in the Naval Depot, and his father and uncle enlisted us into the Navy. And he turned up with a whaler, and this whaler had 3 oars, and Nick was in it, and he said to me, can you row? Well, I rowed here in Brisbane as a junior and for a rowing club, and I said yes, I can row. So we got on board. We were joined by the RAAF pilot of our Commander Lowe. We picked him up, and a matter of people were trying to get to us, and we finished up with Commander Lowe, myself, and 2 others, I don't know who they were, and we were rowing with these oars. We had a little bit of canvas which came in handy later on because they made a bit of a jib sail out of it, and so then a destroyer, a Japanese destroyer, was quite near to us, and a lot of fellas swam to this Jap destroyer, and so we picked up whatever we could, and we made about 3 trips backwards and forwards to pick up survivors. And when they got on the destroyer, they had to strip themselves with their clothes, their overalls and things like that, and they went up on the deck. Well, after about 3 trips, and we're coming back again, and an aeroplane flew over the destroyer, and it was a light plane, and it threw the Jap destroyer in a panic, and they left with those that they had already on board the deck, and they just left us and cleared off. Well, then we picked up a few more. We had some very sore and sorry blokes. Gavin Campbell had a broken leg.
Did you pick, was he in your boat? Yeah. You picked him up? Yeah. Oh.
And McWilliam, who was McWilliam Wine, he was Navy Air Force, whatever they call him, I don't know. I knew him particularly well. He wasn't going very well at all. We had a little bloke from Banks, I think his name was, got blown out of a stoker out of a boiler room, engine room, in a bubble, and he was completely peeled of skin. His skin was all peeled everywhere, the whole lot. He died on board, and I buried him ashore, and 3 of us buried him ashore when we did get ashore. But then a daylight was well and truly broken by that time. I'm talking about 9 o'clock in the morning, I think it would be. Well, then we decided that we'd have to get ashore. Well, Mac, the Air Force pilot officer, he had done reconnaissance around the place, and especially with a man with navigation like he would have. He was the handiest man in our boat. And anyway, we went through the night then, so I was in the water from 12 o'clock midnight until through the next day, and then 6 o'clock the next morning. About 30 hours I was supposed to be. But we did, on one occasion, hear a cry for help on the last night. And it was a cry for help, and it was an American. And so Jummer Brown, a little Jack Mahardy bloke on board, he jumped out of the boat and grabbed us. And this fellow was a tremendous big man, enormous, and he was, his name is slipped my memory now, but nevertheless we got him on board, and then we picked up another bloke and got him on board, and then round about daylight we saw an island, a beach or something, and we got ashore in there, and we got Campbell out and the sick blokes, and Minikin was another bloke that was badly wounded, and we buried the stoker, and then we landed at a place called Le Bourne, not Labuan, Le Bourne, and we landed at the tip. It's just below Krakatoa, so it was about 60 miles that we had travelled to get there, and then it was only a little village, and the natives, for about 3 or 4 days after this, all had little flaming arsehole flags, a red fried egg flag, and so the propaganda had been through, and they weren't particularly keen on us, so 5 of us broke off, and we thought, well, we'll go and try and contact the Dutch army so that they could come down and get these boats. And so after 5 of us started off, and we were all around the 18, 19, 20 mark, we went through a series of little villages on a bitumen road, but the sabotage work was tremendous because they cut timber of trees, and you had to crawl over these trees in places where the villages are, so no motor transport could get through. And we went for about 4 days, I think it was, and we never saw anybody. And then we were picked up by a crowd of Sundanese headhunter blokes. They were very primitive bloody blokes, but I understand there was a bounty on a head of 35 guilders if so they were very, very keen to get this money, and they had big parang knives, and they tied us up back to back on the bitumen road, and there would have been 5, 10 or 11 of us. And anyway, one fella got his arm up here to avoid a blow, and he got his slashed very badly down here. Another bloke died. I had my back to him, and then out of the blue, out of the corner, came a Keystone Cop car, the old Keystone Cops with a wire cage at the back, and a Model A Ford, a Model T Ford or something, I think. And anyway, 2 Japanese policemen got out, and they said, and they were armed, and they of course wanted the ransom money that we took it to be, and they opened the back of the cage door at the back to put the prisoners in, and he said, we can only take 5 people. And so anyway, those that went, so they cut our liana vine off us, and you never saw 7 people get in to where 5 people could get in.
Yeah.
Well, they went down the road towards Panaglang, which is Le Bourne, Panaglang, and then Serang. And I have him back there and retraced it. And anyway, when we got down the road further, they had manacles, and it was a long chain a very long chain, and there were about 10 handcuffs on these, and they handcuffed us to these manacles.
Can I just take you back just a little bit? Was the chaplain with you at any time? Matheson?
No, not at that stage.
No. And but you had buried the stoker?
Yeah.
What about McWilliams?
We cast him overboard in the sea.
Okay.
And he was a observer. He was a lieutenant observer. Yeah. McWilliam. And anyway, I'll
just hold it there for a second. Charlie, would you like to tell us, about you very quickly after you've landed on the coast and you've moved along? But I'd like to know just what clothing you had on and what condition you were in.
Just a short few words before getting into Surrey. As we were picked up by the Jap destroyer, we went up onto the upper deck, and as we went onto the upper deck, we had to strip. There we stood in our baby suits, knowing that this is when you come pre-OW. From there, they transferred us to a transport ship. We were on that for about 7 days. From there, they landed us, and this is when we went up to the Tellerine. I was placed in the theatre, and no blankets, nothing. I was just given this G-string on board the ship, on the destroyer, and that's all we had. Nothing at all. Just that. Then we went into the theatre, and we were told to just sit there, and they just rammed everyone into this theatre, and you had flat out, you had to take turns to have a sleep, and all you laid on was coffee. After a short time we were transferred on further. That's my
Thank you. And now Chilla, if you can go on about...
we went to a Dutchman's home that was apparently the mayor of the town. We were interrogated, and they seemed to have more interest in Queenslanders and West Australians than what they were other part of Australia. And from there, we were out there all day in the sun, and we were naked, completely naked. The boat crew were completely naked, and then we were bundled down to Serang Jail. Serang Jail was a very primitive jail. I can see in Dutch, each cell, you could see in writing in Dutch that it was for 12 people. And when you walked in, you walked through concrete slabs up to here, up to there and there, and a passageway down there, and then they had this big double iron gate which was bolted and locked and so forth. And we were dumped in there. Well, I would say that we would have in the vicinity of 38 an hour in this cell. So if we had to get down in the military style real very quick, so the people could lie along there, say 16 bodies placed as you could be, and 16 there, and then you had in the passageway here, you have people sitting on their backsides, and that's the way we were for the whole time that we're in that jail. And it was just cement. There was no toilet block in the jail of any kind, no shower, no water, no anything. And in that jail they fed us one meal to every 5 meals that anybody else would have, and it was a very small bit of rice with a bit of seaweed on the top. Getting to Stenning was, the jail was just a little boom jail, and it came down here like this, went across there and down there, and there was a big well there, and you could see out, but you couldn't identify who you were talking to if you yelled out across the courtyard to talk, and it was Dr. Stanning, and one fellow said he was a POM. I don't know how, whether he's on the Perth or not, I don't know. Really.
Could be not white.
Anyway, he said, Stanning said, I'm Dr. Stanning. You're right over there. And this fellow said, I ain't had a shit for 5 days. And with that, another pommy bloody voice called out, and I haven't had one since I left Fremantle. But and Stanning said, well, don't worry, you're not eating a diet that, don't worry about that. That's, make that your least worry. And then I don't, it must have been at night time that they took Stanning and Knocker White and the other bloke away, because we didn't know. And
one of the people that went up to Japan with him was a Royal Navy officer. Does that help?
White. That'd be
was
White.
That White, was it? Yeah.
I think it'd be White. He was the navigator on board the ship.
Yeah.
No, that's Harper.
Harper
was
sorry, Harper. Harper.
White was the torpedo man.
Yeah.
And they're both English? So
Yeah.
Royal Navy?
Yeah. RN.
Yeah. Now, if we can move along now, how long were you on Java before you were put into the party to go to Burma?
Well, we were in Java for approximately 9 months, and with that we were working at the wharves, loading stuff onto the wharves. By this time, we haven't been... We went from Serang to Batavia into the bicycle camp, and we were sitting working parties. There were army fellas, 2nd, 3rd MT blokes, old and bowls, that had got from Singapore down and got caught in Java, and we worked on the wharves. We worked in Norm Fuller worked for before the war with Dunlop, and one of our first jobs was to go to Dunlop in Batavia to work there, and Norm said, you know, I left, but I don't want, and he retired from there at a very old age. But we had jobs of building statues of Queen Wilhelmina and all the forefathers and everything else, and they took every bit of brass, every bit of metal that they could out of the place. We were also on in a golf course where there were imported cars. It was duty-free port, and most magnificent American cars and English cars you can imagine. And we were digging gutters around there, and then we also shifted oil drums and camouflaged them with tree leaves and things, and we worked really hard there, but it was possibly the best camp that we were in at that stage.
Can I ask you how did you get to Charlie? How did you get to Burma?
From the jail and the old theatre, they put us on just the ordinary open trucks. We just had to stand up there, hang on to the best we could, and took us into Batavia.
Yeah, and so what vessel did you board then? Was it? Do you know the name of it at all?
No, I don't.
If I said the Daiichi Maru, would it?
No, it wouldn't ring a bell to us, because you're on the wharf and you're down the hold, and you've got no bloody idea what
I don't understand. So what was the route that you went up there?
Well, we went to Changi.
For a while, yes.
We were there for a day and a quarter. Yes. In Changi, and then we boarded another ship in the harbour and went to Burma, and when we got there, we didn't go to Bangkok. We were by the Milmean Pagoda, and we were put in a jail right adjacent to the Milmean Pagoda. Yes. And
wasn't there a lepers camp there somewhere too? Does that ring a bell?
No.
Charlie? No, Charlie does.
Yeah. Well, actually, as Chilla just said, he left heading towards Burma on the trip. he left 3 days before, we left 3 days after him.
Oh.
And we got to Singapore, and we finished up stopping in Singapore, our small party, for about 3 months. And they couldn't move us because the activities of the submarines were too great for their transport.
Well, maybe I better find out, where did you end up on the Burma-Thailand Railway?
Well, we started at...
I just want to find where, I know where you've got to.
Yeah.
Because you're up in Milmean at the moment. But
we left Singapore,
yeah.
and we went by train up to Kuala Lumpur and then across to Butterworth.
Yeah.
And then we boarded a ship for Burma.
Yeah, so you're 3 months behind.
Yeah. And not far off going into Milmean, we got bombed by our own bombers, the B-29s. We lost one Perth boy there. He died of shrapnel. Septicemia set in, a bad operation with the Japs. And we lost one and had to leave him in Milmean.
Yeah.
And from Milmean we went up, and our first camp on the railway was number 15. That's number 5. I was in number 5 group, and Chas would give you a name what one he was in.
Yeah.
Well, we were in 5.
Yes.
Well, a much smaller party.
So was Gavin Campbell with either of you?
Yes, me.
Yeah.
Gavin was with me. But we were you got that off, isn't it?
I'll turn it off. Charlie, when you were working on the Burma-Thailand Railway from the Burma end, who was the main officer in your group, and did you have a doctor with you?
Yes, Major Robinson was the officer in charge of 5 group. We were 5 group.
Yes. And
there was American doctor, Commander Epstein.
Epstein.
And also another American doctor, and another one was...
Lumpkin?
No, yeah, Rudkin, yeah. And there was another Australian doctor, quite an elderly man at the time.
Norm Eady? Colonel Eady?
That's him.
Colonel Norm Eady?
Colonel Norm Eady.
Yeah. And he was older, he was about 47 years of age.
Yeah. Just old enough to be our father at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Chilo, the group you were with, who was mainly in charge?
Colonel Williams and Colonel Anderson VC.
Yes,
and
they
William
combined.
Force and Anderson Force.
Yes.
We kept apart as far as the Japs were concerned. Our doctor was Riley Richards.
Yes.
And
Colonel Coates.
No, we only had Riley Richards. In the first stage, before Charlie got up, we had Edie in the 35 kilo where we went to first. We had Colonel Edie, and we had the other one you mentioned.
Commander.
The American bloke.
Yeah.
Epstein or Lumpkin.
Epstein.
Yeah, one of them died up there, didn't they? Lumpkin. Yeah. Okay. Now, sorry, I'll go back to you, Chilla. Do you remember any of Rolly Richards' orderlies?
Oh yes, he had
Armstrong and Pinky Rhodes.
Pinky Rhodes. I worked with Pinky Rhodes and Armstrong.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, but that was in Thailand where I went up with them.
Yeah.
And Pinky Rhodes was a tremendous bloke.
Yes.
And a big help to our doctor, Riley Richards.
Okay. Now, were you in the camp where Naito was in charge?
Yes.
So you were there when he attempted to kill Jack Coombs? Does that name ring a bell to you?
That's right, yeah. And he also the interpreter,
Bill Drow.
Bill Drow, and he put him in a smallpox tent with people with smallpox. Bill Drow, wonderful man.
Yeah, he only died a few months ago.
Yeah, lovely man.
Yeah.
And he spoke about the Japanese and what blokes that we had did.
Yeah.
But,
so I'll just come over. You're moving down the line as you're the track layers, are you?
we're the railway line layers.
Yeah. Now, Can you remember any concrete and steel bridges at any stage from Tun Bazaar to the border? Can you remember any concrete and steel bridges being built?
Well, when we came back out of Burma by train, we saw a concrete bridge, a steel bridge, but it wasn't.
That was a Canton.
Yeah.
That wasn't us at all.
No. Well, later I'll explain to you why I asked that question. Now, as you moved down, did the conditions get worse? Were you able to trade with any of the Burmese?
No.
No.
No, there was very little trading going on while the actual line was being built.
Tampa Side was the only place
trading. And then when we got to Tamakant in Thailand, that's when a lot of trading was done.
Yes.
But on the actual
Burma side.
building the rail right through until we could get through ourselves.
Yeah.
I
To Tamakant.
hear stories of 340 dozen eggs going into Thailand and into the camps and so on. I never saw an egg the whole time, but no, there was no trading. Mainly there that we were Korean guards. And
excuse me, is that what you were looking for?
no. So,
did either of you spend any time in the hospital camp at 55 Kilo at all? Yeah, where Colonel Coates was?
no.
Did you see Coates at any time?
No.
Oh yeah, I did.
Did you?
I did see him a couple of times.
Yeah. Describe him to me. He wasn't a tall man, was he?
No, he was a shorter man, but he was a great chap. And don't listen to this, Sue. One thing that Colonel Coates was great for, if you go in the toilet and he was there, the first thing he'd do was say,
Have a look at the stool.
yeah, and if necessary, he'd say, I want to see you in the hospital tomorrow to get it done.
Yeah.
It saved a lot of lives.
He was an extraordinary man.
Extraordinary and well respected.
Yes, yeah. Now, what about the climatic conditions while you're up there? Maybe.
Well, we laying the line. We would be out possibly 30 hours through the night when the monsoons come at 4 o'clock, and all we had were G-strings, not anything else at all. No shoes. By this time, I've got to say the army fellas, they had their clothing was worn to buggery too. But then we would come in and you'd have 5 hours buddy camp, and then you'd go out again. And why we were out so late? Because they had diesel trucks with railway wheels on them, and we would wait for the sleepers and the rails to come up to complete that day's work. When it was 32 hours, that's too very bad. They'd get it way back from us. But a lot of the rails were from the railway line to Mandalay, and they were pulled up, and so where these fellows doing the earthwork and everything else, the Jap engineers had their plan, but the bloody railway lines didn't agree with it. They go out further and so forth. But yeah.
Now, did you have any elephants? Were they seeing the elephants?
Yes, we did. We worked with them on the railway line on the Fettling side, and but the elephants would go on strike, and they'd sit on their bums, and of course, little Buck, we've got a name for it.
Bahut.
Yeah, he would get belted around, but there was nothing to do. They just they're human. They're human. I had one little one at 60 Kilo camp that I had to take rice across in the afternoon to where the hospital hut was, and especially in the rain, and I had to go down. There was a gully in the bank, and I'd have this basket of rice in my back, and I'd go down there, and this bloody little elephant used to push him in the arse with his bloody thing, you know, and he'd laugh and haw, haw, haw and everything else, but you wouldn't dare spell a bit of bloody rice, you couldn't do it. But they yeah.
Did you see any of the other doctors? Now I think someone mentioned Major Crams.
Major Crams,
yeah. And Major Hobbs, Major Fisher.
No.
Yeah, Colonel Hamilton, who was the boss doctor up there, not Coates. Cumming. Were you aware that Lumpkin died while he was up there on the line?
No.
Did you have any contact with any of the Dutch doctors? Like one?
Yes, Dr. Hacking I had.
Yeah.
Dr. Hacking and Major Crans were in Thailand, and we went in his camp. We were in Canberra.
Yes.
Or Kanchanaburi.
Yes, but that's when you're down in Thailand.
Yeah.
But Hacking, when Lumpkin died, Hacking got involved with the Houston boys.
That's right.
And they thought the world of
yes,
him.
I know.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I went through from America to Holland. They told me where he was. Not that he would remember me, but he passed away. I think it was.
Yeah.
He wasn't there.
Did you ever hear of a Dutch chemist up there by the name of Van Boxtel?
I've heard. I don't place his name, but he is the man that went out and industrial chemist and got the from the roots made this morphine type of stuff for injections.
Yeah. Were either of you in the vicinity of the point where the railway was joined in due course?
Yes, I was. Yes.
Yeah.
It joined at little Nicky, I think they call the place, or Nicky, and it was that was the finish of everything.
Did you actually see the joining?
I was there with Nick Carter, yeah. They gave
So
us,
it actually joined.
well,
Did you see the ceremony? Did you see
yeah,
all
yeah,
the Japanese?
we were part of it, and anyway, they had a tent, and with the working party of us that were there, they had a stall with all the fruit in the bloody world on it, and they gave us shorts and things to go up, and then we had to go up and shake the hand of the Jap bloody bloke who was in charge of it or something, and then they gave us the fruit, and you walked through the tent, and then they took the fruit off you and took the clothes off you, and that was it. But I can't find that thing that it as far as the Perth boys are concerned, that this has just been loaned out, and I can't put my hand to it, but it's here it is. They're the dates of Williams Force of every camp that we're in.
Marvellous, marvellous. I'll just stop with. Can you remember your journey out of Burma down into Siam?
Actually, when the line was all joined up, there was a big meeting camp of all the 3-5 group, and that all met together at 105 Kilo Camp.
Yes.
And then from there, the boys that was going to go to Japan, they all left from there. And at that particular time, I was very, very sick, and I didn't even know they'd gone. And after that, I went up into the big hospital up into Thailand.
That railway line must have been linked up in January 44, because we were there the 26th of December 43 to the 13th of January 44 at Little Nicky.
Well, the railway was finished in October 43.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's when all the boys all met at 105.
Yes.
And the people that was going to go to Japan, I was picked to go to Japan with the crowd, but I got very sick and couldn't go, and I never ever went to Japan. And up into the hospital and back, There were 3 months of that period that I can't remember.
Was the hospital in Thailand?
Yeah, in Thailand.
Okay.
Outside of Bangkok somewhere.
Yes.
I don't remember 3 months.
Was this the huge hospital?
Yeah,
10,000 patients.
Yeah.
Put that in there.
So you were in there.
Yeah, I was in there.
Yeah.
I don't know how long for.
I just put it in.
And they sent us back to Tamarkan. And
Yes.
from Tamarkan we left and went up to a place like Ketchu Mountain. Where
Ketchu Mountain, yeah.
That's where we built. That's where I built the airport.
Yes, and you were there at the end of the war then.
Right up to the end of the war, and I had the privilege of flying out from Ketchu Mountain to Rangoon.
Yeah.
And I spent about 1 month in Rangoon.
Yes, yeah. So you're one of the unusual ones that came back through Rangoon.
Through Rangoon.
Yeah. Do you remember any other Aussies that were in Ketchu Mountain?
Norm Fuller.
Yes.
Norm Fuller was there. Ernie Turvey. You lose a lot of these.
What about some of the soldiers? Do you remember any of the? Did you chum up with any of the soldiers? Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Now that was significant. It's just that I have another fellow.
Actually, Commander Epstein wanted to grab all the Navy boys and take them home.
Yes.
To America.
Yeah.
But,
was he there in that camp as well, was he?
No, he wasn't there, but he was in the vicinity of it.
Ketchu Mountain camp. Yeah.
And he wanted to claim all the Perth boys, but the Australian wouldn't allow it to happen.
Yeah. Now, just a final question for you. You told me, well, I'm not sure which one of you told me you knew about hecking, but did you know any other Dutch doctors?
No, he was the only one I knew.
Yeah.
He put me through a massage course.
Yeah.
And which in Japan turned very, very handy, I can tell you.
Yes, yeah.
But he was a small man. His father was of Dutch origin and his mother was Indonesian. And he was a half caste actually. And he, in my honest opinion, was the only doctor on the line that understood tropical diseases. He knew tropical diseases. Well, that's in Java. That's where he got his experience.
We'll go back, Chilla, to your leaving Burma, or the Burma end of the line, and going down to Siam.
Yeah, well, we got to Canberra, and from Canberra we did a series of 3 or 4 overnight days in non-product and non-competent and so forth, and then they bundled us into trains, open trains, and took us down to through Kuala Lumpur down through Malaya and took us to Singapore. At Singapore we were based in a camp called River Valley Camp, and it was a very primitive camp and boiled all down, but it was a staging camp for the Japanese party going away. And we were very fortunate, our section of the mob, that they couldn't get us down the hold in the Singapore docks, so we had to wait for another ship, and the Rokia Maru was the one that left with the mob, and we know the history of that. And we left on the Awa Maru, AWA Maru.
Oh, you had a luxury there vessel.
And the Awa Maru, we worked on a dry dock in Singapore, and reclamation of land and dry dock and something. And we lived on Jeep Island, we called it Jeep Island, there was something on Jeep Island.
And that's where Riley Richards was?
Yeah. And then we got on the Awa Maru. The Awa Maru had the bow shot off. It had collision mats on either side of the bow, and we travelled mainly by night and crept along the coast, trying to coast it during the day, and we landed at Moji in Kyushu, and from there in the toilet was written a bit of the story of the Roco and Maru. So that's the first we knew that it had gone down. And so then we went to various camps, and we went to camp. There were only 3 sailors there, and Chataway, Ron Crick and myself, and we had 150 in the camp, 1 Dutch officer. We had 1 doctor, Dr. Higgins, and Cyclops they called him. And
oh yes, yeah, he was from the Burma end.
Yeah, and we.
Well, that was the same camp as Neil McPherson, was it?
Yeah, that's. I was his second judge. I was his medical orderly.
Right.
And but they had no medical orderlies.
Yeah.
So I think it's because of my age that they seconded me as a medical orderly, and I virtually ran the hospital. And then a crowd of came from Manila with Dr. Goodman, an American doctor, and they were louse-bitten in a very shocking state. And that's where we stayed until the end of the war. And we just discussed that John Higgins, Captain John Higgins, was your medical officer in Japan.
In Japan, and the name of that camp, if you know.
24.
Yes. Camp
24, Fukuoka district.
Yes, yeah. And did you stay in that? Or what were the conditions like in that camp, and what work were you doing?
Well, it was a coal mining camp.
Yeah.
But from day one, I was seconded to be outsider to Cyclops.
Yes, yeah.
And so we were in that camp for about 9 months.
Yes.
To the end of the war.
Ah, you were there the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
so, do you remember the day when the war was over?
Yes, I do, because the Japs, you've heard the story many times, they all left overnight, and we were just in the camp on our own, and the camp commandant didn't leave, and he announced to us that a peace treaty was being declared, and in other words, we were still under the auspices of the Japanese army. So the army boys, what they did, they came up to me and got some bloody mercurochrome, and they produced a bloody Australian flag, and they went round to where the guards were. There were no guards, had all gone, and we just put up the flag, and the camp commandant, we gave him a job in the cookhouse doing bloody slice work in the camp cookhouse, and then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, no, at about midday, a B-27 a B-27 flew over and said that the war is over, peace has been declared, and you stay where you are until such times as we contact you. And they, which we did, and they're the things they drop from the air if they're any use to. So at 4 o'clock they came by and they dropped all the supplies, and we had a funny thing. We had K rations for food, and they didn't. The boys, after 3 or 4 days, got bloody crook, and they all went back to rice again.
Yes. And how did you get home?
We seconded a train. After about 6 weeks, we seconded a train through the people off the railway station in this little village where we were, and told the guard and the fireman and the driver that we wanted to go to Nagasaki. So they took us to Nagasaki, and we went through. I don't think it would be the heart of Nagasaki, but what we went through was very badly. There was no debris or anything else at all. Everything had disintegrated. And in the interim there, that the Americans had put up big godowns, and from there we were in American uniforms dropped from the aeroplanes. Then they took us there and fumigated us, and then they had store mart thing with open trestles around. You go around, gave you a marble bag, and you got a toothbrush, toothpaste, and things that soap and personal items. And then they put us into Jungle Greens and boarded us on the Shenango, an aircraft carrier. And there was no room for a lot of people on. They just bulldozed planes into the harbour, the Americans. And we were in the harbour quite a few days because of a cyclone coming, and they got the all clear of the cyclone, but it was pretty bloody rough. And we went to Okinawa, and we landed at Okinawa Island, and there were just army huts there, and a big landing strip there. And the following day, you're bundled into DC-2s, and they had garden seats in the DC-2s, and they flew us to Manila. And Manila, we went into an enormous big circus tents we were put into, and it's there that they asked me if everyone, if any war criminal act. So I had a complaint about the doctors and the staff, the Jap staff, and so I gave an affidavit which is in there, and they flew me home to Darwin. I was in Darwin Naval Depot for a couple of days, and then they took me out to see a ship come in with from Burma or India, or wherever it was, and I went in naval shorts. They'd rigged me up into Navy gear by this time. I had more uniforms than the Salvation Army, like, and anyway, I went out in the whaler and out to the minutes, out to the ship, and I came back without a bloody one stitch of Navy clothes. Every person boy in the bloody ship came down. They wanted to know about the Jap fellas, you know. And so then I got kitted out again, and then they flew me to Archerfield, and from there we'd never had a medical inspection at all. Shocking, but yeah. So it just left. One bloke went to Sydney, and we'd never seen a woman in uniform, a major in the army in Darwin, and she sent every Sydney bloke to Brisbane and every Brisbane bloke to Sydney. Yeah. And there was a fellow named Seth Ramelli. He was an Australian halfback in the 1939 tour that never played, and he was a bombardier, and bombardier Seth Ramelli. And Ram said to me, "Goodbye, Bombardier Ramelli." I said, "Goodbye, able seaman Goodchap." And he went to me, and I went to he, and he got to Sydney, and I got to Brisbane.
Now I've got a couple of difficult questions for each of you. I'll start with you, Charlie. Would you be prepared to tell me what you consider to be the worst experience that you had as a POW?
As a POW?
Yeah, either personally or what you saw.
Yeah, that's a hard one, that one. Actually, in most, generally, if you just kept working and keeping out of trouble, the way they used to bash us was very, very hard. And you couldn't do a thing, you just had to take it and watch your mate get done over the same. You just couldn't do a thing about it.
Is there one particular incident that is imprinted?
Things like that happened several times, and it was just a matter of, I couldn't pinpoint one specific time. But the only thing that I don't want to experience it again.
No. And what about going to the complete contrast? What's the nicest memory you have of your experience of being a POW?
was just pleased to see your mate still alive each day.
Yes.
That's really what it amounts to. We all wanted to get home.
Yes.
And don't you think that, Joe?
Yes, well, my worst case of real fear was when the Sundanese tribesmen got us and we had no chance in the world from there. Folks were getting cut up and so forth. And that Black Maria came round the corner, the Keystone Cop thing, that was my worst, by far my worst.
Yes.
And I had nightmares after about that, and the nightmares were not true with what actually happened. And I had those for many years after, and then they disappeared. And I'm very thankful for that. The best thing that happened with me, I would say that every day that I was a prisoner of war, I enjoyed the experience of learning. And that was my true thought. I don't regret one day of my life ever, and POW included. It was a learning experience where I went from a love yourself bloody college boy in Brisbane to a man. And that was,
That's right.
that is really what it was. Manhood was, and to be accepted, and to be accepted on an equal footing with your peers, it is just a wonderful feeling. But, yes.
A moment of reflection.
Yeah.
Chile, you did mention that you worked with Sid Krantz at one stage. Could you tell us what sort of a man, what your opinion of him as a man, and
Well,
did you see any of his work?
He was not a big statue, but what he did have, he was a solid sort of a bloke. And he told me he came from South Australia, and he was a specialist. And but he's a man that, if he made up his own mind, that no one would sway him and wouldn't care who it was. He was determined, a real determined, dedicated bloke to his industry. It was my pleasure to be with him. That's what I'll say.
And one other person I'd like to question both of you about is your sick berth attendant Cunningham, was it?
Jock Cunningham.
Jock Cunningham, yeah.
Can I go first?
Yes?
Jock Cunningham was the biggest arsehole of a man I ever met in my bloody life. And if he could get out of it, he would do. And he'd cringe and bloody crawl and cry, and he was an arsehole. Now you.
I don't know anything about him because he wasn't with our group.
No.
So all I know was Cunningham,
Yeah.
ERA on the sick berth attendant on Perth. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
He was a chief PO attendant.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that wasn't not my kettle of fish.
No. Well, I can only say to both of you, thank you so much for honouring me with the tape. I will be showing this to your colleagues one day back in Perth.
Lovely, that is.
Yeah.
Now you tell us.
So, yeah.
Oh, well.
Cunningham?
Not including, I don't know where Cunningham is. He probably is up there saying.
I think he has.
Charlie and I
I'll
are
stop
very
at
pleased to be here today with you, and thank you. You brought back memories, but it's pleasant being with you, and we've enjoyed your company. Thank you.
I'd like,
There.
I'd like to support Chiller on those remarks. It has been a pleasure to meet you in person, and I sincerely hope what you've got in mind turns out a great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Trilla,
Okay.
and